Hello market participants, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, we'll try to understand what are tariffs, its impact on the US economy and the US markets, its impact on our economy and what is happening in the markets right now. Fourth, we'll talk about what are the different sectors that are being impacted positively as well as negatively. And lastly, we'll talk about my assessment and what I'm doing currently in this market right now as an investor. So on that note, let's get into the video. So let's briefly understand what tariffs are. So tariffs are basically taxes that a government puts on goods coming from another country. Like when a company brings or imports something into a country like cars, phones, mobiles, semiconductors, components basically, or any stuff, the government makes them pay extra money at the border, which is known as a tariff. Right. Now let's understand why countries use tariff. First and foremost reason is to make imported goods more expensive, so that companies produce stuff locally and that the local consumers also prefer domestic stuff because the price is lower. Second is to protect the businesses and jobs inside the own country. And the third is which is going on right now, is to punish or pressure other countries into trade fights. Right. So now let's understand what is the effect of tariffs on the US economy and what is happening in the US market. So the US economy, as we all know, is basically a consumer economy. That is, they consume things rather than producing, due to that is, they are a more import based economy, and due to which the manpower in US is quite high. That is why companies like Apple, Nike, H&M, Zara, they prefer outsourcing to other cheaper companies. They prefer outsourcing to companies where labor cost is cheaper, such as China, Vietnam, India, Bangladesh, etc. Right. Now that tariffs have been implemented, what will happen is that these companies like Apple, Microsoft, H&M, Zara, Nike, what will happen is that these companies will have to pay significant costs for outsourcing their products. Like for Nike, in case it gets us, so I think H&M and Zara get that clothes made in Bangladesh and Vietnam, I think. Yeah. So what happens is that these companies will have to, these products will get very expensive, right? And when these products get expensive, the cost has to either be absorbed by the company itself, that is H&M and Zara, or it has to be absorbed by the consumer. And the consumers in US are already in quite a bit of pain. So this is another reason why these tariffs might not be a good idea. Now, why the US markets are falling is because rather than India and China, the most impact the tariffs will have is on the US economy itself. There are fears of recession as well as inflation. Now, why inflation? Is because the cost of goods will rise so much because of the tariffs, and hence the price of the products will rise. Now, if the consumers are somehow able to match it, then that will again lead to inflation because consumers are buying things at higher prices, right? And the markets always tend to fall in such uncertain times. Like even when COVID came out, the markets like crashed 5-10% each and every day. Like not each and every day, but we saw quite a steep fall even in 2020. See, the current markets right now, both India, US, all over the world, they are uncertain as they were in during COVID times. And during September to Jan, we saw that the Indian market fell because there were obvious reasons like overvaluation, slowing growth, and there was a lot of froth in the market. But this fall, this is due to uncertainty because nobody knows at what point the tariff will stop, at what times they will come to an agreement, and all that. So about the Indian economy, I think this is a very good opportunity for India to replace China in many of the in many fields such as like semiconductor, textile, and all that. Because although tariffs have been implemented on India, they have been implemented at a like very low tariffs as compared to other nations. Let's briefly understand the potential negative impacts that these tariffs can have on the Indian economy. So the first is that increased export costs. So tariffs will directly increase the cost of Indian goods that are being exported to the US, like chemicals, auto ancillaries, components, etc. Next is that it will lead to economic slowdown because the reduced export competitiveness, it could contribute to economic slowdown in India, particularly in export-oriented industries, because US, although it is a small part, it is an essential part of the Indian GDP and Indian economic growth. Now, the volatility that we are seeing in current markets, right, in the Indian markets right now, is also due to these tariffs. Right, now let's understand some of the positive impacts that we will have. So first is that there is a big opportunity for India in a trade deal. Right. So India should focus on negotiating a bilateral trade agreement with the US, which will provide us to secure more favorable trading terms in the long term, potentially replacing China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, and other low-cost producers in the long run. And the second is shift in manufacturing. Like the tariffs are causing some companies like Apple to shift production in India to mitigate the impact of tariffs, and also the uh, cost of production or the cost of labor in India is also pretty low as compared to other countries, and of course US, which will also boost India's Make in India initiative and create new manufacturing jobs and all that. And you can connect the dots. And next is the strategic advantage that India is trying to use the situation to gain advantage over other Asian countries, and I think this is a pretty big opportunity for the Indian government. But it all depends on how India can capitalize this opportunity to replace China and become another major trade partner. And also, signing a bilateral trade agreement and negotiating will be a good way out of here. One way that India can reduce its trade deficit and also the tariffs is by importing crude oil or gas from the US, which will reduce the trade deficit, and hence lower tariffs will get implemented. So now let's talk about some of the sectors that are affected positively as well as negatively. Right. So first is the automobile and auto ancillary companies. So these companies are going to get affected negatively because of higher tariffs. Companies will not import. And next is the chemical sector that will also get negatively affected. You can also find chemical companies that have higher exposure to US that will again have a more negative impact. And the third is the IT sector. As we already know, it won't affect IT sector directly, but it will affect the sectors that IT caters to. You get me? Like for example, manufacturing, retail in the US. So if these companies go through a drawdown, the IT companies in the US will go through a drawdown, which will lead to a drawdown in the Indian IT companies. Textile is another sector that can get positively affected if India manages if India manages to grab the opportunities. And lastly, let's talk about what is my assessment and what I am doing as an investor right now. So my assessment is that these are uncertain times, no doubt, that we must stay in the market. If you're someone who didn't quite exit at September, let's say September to October, you didn't exit. Now I don't see any reason why you should exit right now, especially in times of uncertainty, because whenever the indexes like Nifty or Dow Jones, whenever they experience the steepest fall, right? So the period after that fall is the period which generates the highest returns. You can also check historically, even during the 2008 crisis, even during COVID, the rebound rally, that is the period that generates the highest returns. So if you haven't exited some stocks, don't exit right now. Wait for the rebound. Like when the market rebounds, almost everything rebounds, good or bad, almost everything rebounds. So just have patience, wait. If you have like fundamentally genuinely good stocks, then I don't see any reason why you should exit it. Right? So just wait on. Like these are times when everybody will become micro expert. Everybody will tell you, even your neighbor will tell you like do this, do that. But just wait and watch. Wait for the froth to dissolve. Okay? These are uncertain times, and resist panic selling. That is the most important thing to follow during these times, because these are the times when um, people tend to panic sell. But trust me, don't panic sell. Wait for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. I don't know how long this is going to last, but just wait for things to calm down and then take an informed decision. Right. Now let's look at the long-term perspectives. So first is that the market fluctuations, they are temporary. We must maintain a long-term perspective view. Let's say 3 to 5 years. Over 3 to 5 years, these bumps along the way, they tend to flatten out, and it all comes back to the normal. But another thing I wanted to highlight is that keep aside some cash, like 4 to 5 months, and if you are sitting on some cash for investing, this is probably a good time to deploy it. But if you don't want to go for a stock specific approach, then you can always go for index ETFs or mutual fund SIPs. Like this is the time to actually start investing, because you see, 100 almost everybody was willing to invest in the Nifty when it was at 26,000, but only 5% or maybe even 10% are willing to invest right now, and that is the reason why only 10% of investors become successful, right? I also heard a quote from Vijay Kedia which said that
मेरा कोट भी है मैडम कि दुनिया में जो भी लोगों ने जो भी पैसे कमाए हैं वो बेयर मार्केट में इन्वेस्ट करके पैसे कमाए हैं। बुल मार्केट में इन्वेस्ट करके आपने ज्यादा वेल्थ क्रिएट नहीं की। देयर इज अ डिफरेंस बिटवीन मेकिंग मनी एंड क्रिएटिंग वेल्थ। जो वेल्थ मार्केट में क्रिएट होती है वो क्राइसिस के अंदर भी क्रिएट होती है। चाहे आपको लीमन ब्रदर्स की क्राइसिस ले लीजिए या आप कोविड की क्राइसिस ले लीजिए या कोई भी आप क्राइसिस लीजिए, उसमें जिस आदमी ने जो शेयर्स ले लिया हिम्मत करके या कैसे भी एडजस्ट करके अपने पोर्टफोलियो को, उसने पैसा कमाया यहाँ पे।
So this is all for today's video. I hope you all liked it. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you again in the next one. Thank you.